Good afternoon, sir. Um, Tigers are seen as flagship species in India. India is blessed to have 75% of tiger population, and for the last 15 odd years that we've had the tiger conservation program in earnest in India, it is considered a success. How do you reflect on that? You three experts of tigers, you've been studying and watching the tigers for such a long time. BK sir, how do you reflect? Would you see the last 15 years as a success story, or are there concerns that you see and you would like to flag?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, India Today, for having me here. India is a success story because there are 17 tiger countries, and India contributes 70% of all the tigers in wild in world, and therefore, and also St. Petersburg's declaration in 2010 that we will double the number I think by about 2025. We have done it ahead of the schedule. So India is all along a success story. But there are also the matters of concern. There are Forest Survey of India report, the last report which came out in 2019, that said that tiger conservation is okay. The numbers have gone up. In fact, the numbers have gone up manifold. And but the report said that a large number of tiger reserves have shrunk. We have lost areas. And I was fortunately involved after serving up to the age of 60, after serving Karnataka. I was consultant with Wildlife Institute of India, National Tiger Conservation Authority, and therefore I have had opportunity to see all tiger reserves of this country. And tiger reserves are the best forests of that state, the best forests, where rivers originate. And most of our rivers, the forests are the mother of rivers, and most of the rivers, the life is dependent on that. And there, why we need to preserve tiger reserves is because in our own interest. If there are no forests, believe me, the water level in the rivers will go down. Even the summer flow will vanish, completely vanish. All the seasonal, the perennial streams will become seasonal streams, and so on and so forth. Rest you can imagine, because right from the morning I have been seeing that every speaker, especially Mr. Raj Changappa and several other speakers have been talking on climate change. So I would only like to flag here that things are going on very well, but there are certain compulsions which the managers and the stakeholders, the local communities and the political leaders, they have certain responsibilities. Because if a political leader gives a statement that please admit the community who have been displaced, who have already been relocated in 2005, 2006, admit them back and give them the rights under Forest Rights Act, then it is a disaster. Because it goes like wildfire, and the Forest Rights Act, the forest officers can't do anything. Forest Rights Act, there are so many other bosses for that. There are Social Welfare Department is the boss, Collector of the district is the boss. I'm not talking of with reference to Karnataka only. I am talking of with reference to the whole country, especially the central Indian landscape. Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, where tiger reserves have shrunk considerably. So, therefore, and the Forest Rights Act, although it is very good to keep the community on board, although it is, Ravi was telling in the morning, but it is very bad. It has been one of the driver of accelerated deforestation. It has done a lot of damage in various other states, and there are political leaders, there are politicians, I won't name the parties, but they have taken advantage of that, And they think that by admitting more and more forest rights claim, we are doing favor to the
it's a political
community.
move. It becomes a political issue, basically.
And then it becomes very disturbing. And that is how in the decadal reference which came out in last Forest Survey of India report, the reserves have shrunk. That is a matter of serious concern.
Yeah.
And I would like to flag that very strongly.
Right, sir. Pranav, how do you reflect on the last 15 years? What are your key learnings?
So I don't think 15 years is an appropriate timeline to reflect really on this. The journey started at least 50 years ago with the establishment of Project Tiger and so on. And I think that was prescient in so many ways. And that level of commitment at the highest level and continued commitment over the last 5 or so decades, I think we're seeing the fruits of seeds that were sown then. Obviously, there's been impetus in the last 15 years as well. So that's one reflection, highest levels of political commitment and the setting up of systems and then financing, protected areas that, many of which have succeeded and so on. So I think that's been critical and it's been key. The other aspect is obviously this is done in a context where, a lot of India's tiger habitats are shared by tigers with people in large numbers sometimes. So the success has not been despite people, it's been, the fact that tigers can persist in areas that are, in PAs and other areas that support, local communities. Take Satyamangalam, for example. There's over 100,000 people living inside this tiger reserve. The tiger population has gone up, if I'm not mistaken, from single digits to 70 or 80 individuals over the last decade or 2 decades. So I think there are these stories that need to be understood, examined, and processed and integrated into our conservation planning. There's one other note, one other thought I'd like to add here very quickly. If you look at tiger conservation in India over the last 15 years or longer, there are many amazing success stories to tell. But tigers still only occur in about 30% or less of the overall habitat of the species. So the fact is there are vast areas of tiger habitat that still don't sustain the species. Some of these areas include protected areas with multiple decades of conservation. So protected areas are not guaranteed to succeed. So looking at both successes and failures can be very instructive.
Joseph, how do you reflect? A very quick take.
Yeah, I'll be very quick because both the speakers have covered much. You asked specifically for the last 15 years what is being done. About 15 years back, in 2010, the 13 tiger range countries met together for a very ambitious goal, perhaps the most ambitious conservation goal of trying to double tiger numbers. India was part of that. And there were numbers released that we know that talk of India actually doubling numbers.
Yes.
We won't go too much into that because that is often a political game. Yeah. Having said that, more rigorous systems of monitoring have been put in place that are much better than earlier. And if you look at this relative to other tiger range countries, while India so-called stabilized or even increased tiger numbers, several other countries that had signed up, there are 0 tigers now. Yeah. Whether it be Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, they're empty of tigers. So in that context, relatively, India has done much better. And the efforts that it has taken towards tiger conservation that the speakers mentioned have to be commended. But there is still a lot that needs to be done because these similar numbers were mentioned back in 2005, 2009. And that was a time when Sariska and Pranav were poached out. Correct. So there is no sense for complacency at all. Yeah. We know that in terms of numbers, there are conservationists from this state that talk of 10,000 tigers. Right. The possibility of 10,000 tigers in India. Correct. So we have still a long way to go if you look at what this country can sustain. Right. But yes, this country has done a lot towards tiger conservation in the last 15 years and that has to be acknowledged.
Yeah. So we'll stay with you. We'll touch upon the other contentious point that Singh sir brought up. 45% of tiger habitats are shared with millions of people, which is a significantly high number. Forest dwellers or local communities, are they a part of the problem or are they a part of the solution?
I mean, there is no question about it. I think Dr. Chellam touched upon this earlier. They have to be part of the solution, Yeah. There is no more fortress conservation that is possible. We can't just be, tigers in tiger reserves and people outside. Unfortunately, in the past, it has been a very exclusive approach of keeping the people outside and tigers inside. But the time for that is, it's time that we change that. In fact, these numbers that you're talking about are from a recent paper in Science.
Published in Science, yeah.
Published in Science, which talk about tiger recovery amidst people and poverty. So these numbers of 60 million people and 45% of the habitat, we are talking of that in slightly economically advantaged societies. Yeah. Or if you look at it state-wise, this is largely Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Uttarakhand. But there are also vast habitats like Jharkhand, Palamau, Orissa, where people and tigers don't, in fact, there are no tigers there at all.
Correct.
Hardly any tigers there, where these numbers will not hold.
Right.
So, in terms of the future, we have to work with these 60 million people that you're talking about, even if it is 45% of the tiger-occupied habitat. There is simply no question of not involving them, and it can't be just restricted to, incentives for voluntary relocation and then leaving them. There has to be hand-holding in terms of how they progress further. And we know that if people are bought into this picture in a more inclusive framework, it can actually help tiger numbers. It can help both predator, people, and the planet. Right. Because more area comes under tiger conservation where people are more friendly towards allowing carnivores in their backyard, either incentivized or because they get direct revenue or otherwise.
To earn from the tigers.
Yes. So this is very much the future, I think. Yes.
Right. Singh sir, if we talk about Sundarbans, the Sundarbans, the tigers there face the double threat of rising sea level as well as habitat erosion as well. What is the future looking like for them? How do we save them?
See, the way now every speaker has been talking of climate change, and it's a matter of real concern. Now, sea level rising, IPCC, the latest report, one of the latest reports have said that beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade, a lot of things would vanish. And we have already seen some of those Southeast Asian countries, the sea level is rising faster than about 10 centimeter rise is also observed sometimes. And 2023 was the warmest, we thought, until the latest report came. 2023 itself was 1.45 degrees centigrade warmer than the pre-industrial period. 2024 was 1.55 degrees centigrade, which has breached the limit set by Paris Climate Accord 2015. And of course, the accord, it does not mean that we have failed and we should close our eyes and we should go back, etc., etc. We should keep trying. And even if the temperature is breached, even if 1.5 degrees centigrade has been breached, there is a chance that we will come back within 1.5. And the way it is breaching, I think Bangladesh will, a large part of Bangladesh is going to go, all these island nations. Because you said only Sundarbans, I am talking, so therefore the future is, with the rising sea level, it is not very bright. And there the community again, because once the sea goes to the land, and because often what we do, we will make wall, we will make sure that the sea doesn't cross a wall. It doesn't happen that way. When sea has to cross, it will go 4 stories building also when the sea level rises. And therefore, let us not play with the climate. And the sea level rise is a very, very dangerous thing. And, and the community in Sundarbans, I had been to Sundarbans for an evaluation. And what I found that those communities are also very poor type of people. They are small islands. Each one of them live on one island or the other, and the mode of transport is the boat. And once the sea level rises, all their islands is underwater. And therefore, and where they grow some agriculture, some crop, all those land becomes saline, and it takes 10 to 15 years for those lands to recover.
Correct.
And that is too late. And therefore, it is not only the tigers of Sundarban which are in danger because of the sea level rise, it is also the community under threat.
The communities and the entire ecosystem. Pranav, how do you reflect on that? What can we do for Sundarban tigers?
Well, I think, as Sir put it, sadly the writing is on the wall for low-lying, submergence-prone areas. And really, it's a global problem. Right, so I think the commitments and the level of ambition that India shows in sort of transitioning to a low-carbon economy, over the next few decades, I think we all need to watch that closely. We need to participate in those conversations and processes to the extent that we can, and really beyond that, when it comes to the Sundarbans in particular, I think the flow of fresh water and sediment and silt into the delta of the Brahmaputra and the Ganga, the Hooghly. That holds a key to making whatever small gains we can make, because the deposition of silt leads to the formation of mangrove islands, and if deposition rates exceed erosion rates, there's some possibility of at least holding the tide back, so to speak, even if it's not for posterity, even if it's for a few decades. And so that's one. The other, of course, as Sir said, is working on resilience. So that's working on ecosystem resilience. The other is working on the resilience of human systems there, which is, we know agriculturalists are vulnerable. We know that people whose livelihoods are tied to the sea and the mangrove ecosystems are vulnerable. So really envisioning a shift in modes of livelihood towards, towards livelihoods that may be less impacted by some of these uncertainties and so on. And finally, as I said, it's not just a matter of the mangrove islands going underwater. That would be tragic, but it's going to be millions of people, tens of millions of people who may be uprooted. There may be massive displacements. So really having a plan and a vision to anticipate those dire futures and looking ahead to see how we can try and make this delta more resilient to the changes.
Shifting the topic, Joseph sir, India is planning translocation projects of tigers, moving some of them from overpopulated reserves and states to lesser populated areas. How viable are these projects and how ethical are these?
How ethical did you say?
Both. Viable and ethical, both. First, let's talk about viability.
Yeah, I would be a little cautious about, jumping into translocations. Unfortunately, the Forest Department has been doing that a lot these days. There have been very good examples of translocation projects. For example, Panna and Sariska. Sariska less so, but Panna very much. When we lost all the tigers in Panna in 2009, today there are over 50 tigers. So that is clearly a very planned reintroduction translocation project at the highest level involving the Prime Minister down to the boots on the ground that succeeded. But if you're talking about translocating tigers from overpopulated to less populated or, tigers that disperse out, we must remember that, the model that we've chosen for the country is tigers and tiger reserves connected in a meta-population framework through which they disperse and where their ecological processes are intact. If we try to lift tigers from one tiger reserve to the other, and think that is the way forward, we will be largely compromising on this meta-population framework and the landscape approach that we've signed in for. That will be like, glorified parks or safari parks where we move, tigers from one park to the other. Yeah. So we don't want to be going there, but having said that, certain parks are not connected. And if we find that they're depleted or there is no other way to supplement populations, in a very planned manner, after looking at the threats that have been there, have been extirpated, ensuring that there is enough prey to, to harbor the extra tigers that come in there, and there is enough protection in that park. There is a scope for, translocating tigers, especially in India, where some parks have more and some parks have less, and where there is no connectivity. We must also remember that certain other countries that have lost tigers, they are really looking at this as a move forward, but they will not even get one tiger because there are no other tigers in that country. Correct. So in India, yes, there is a scope for that, but one must do it in a cautious manner.
Right. Singh sir, coming to you, what do you reckon are the major challenges ahead for us, for tigers, across the country? Not a specific region, but across the country. Habitat loss, as we call them, but what are your concerns?
See, to be honest, no one says that, either a political person or any section of society will never say that they don't like tiger and forest. They will all say they will like tiger and forest. But when the conflict comes, when you start diverting forest tiger reserves for projects, you start diverting tiger reserves areas for linear projects, you start cutting tiger forests, and then for example, because forest minister is here, when I was chief wildlife warden, I had suggested that Kudremukh should be a tiger reserve. It had gone all the way up with the recommendation, everybody's recommendation, it had gone, it came down, and then it was denied by the state government. So the advantage then was that certain activities will be suspended. Certain industries, certain mining, quarrying, etc. will be suspended, and all economy, the community will be encouraged to have a land-based economy, and they will encourage agriculture, encourage horticulture, encourage growing of plants, etc. So, but this was now, as I said in the beginning, that more and more forest area, the good forests are all tiger reserves throughout the country. There are 52 odd tiger reserves in the country, and all the tiger reserves are in the best of the forests. And therefore, it is better that we should have, and the tiger reserves have certain laws. Now, this 2006 amendment of Wildlife Protection Act, the tiger chapter was introduced, and one of the tiger needs inviolate space, where tiger and human and cattle, they cannot live together. Yeah. And therefore the biggest idea, the biggest recommendation was to relocate people outside, and it was done. I will take another example of Nagarhole. When I was chief wildlife warden, lot of relocation took place. Now there were those days, 2010-11, 1700 families were used to live inside Nagarhole Tiger Reserve, and it had come down to 300. It had come down to 300, and now again, because if we go on encouraging, Forest Rights Act is a floodgate.
Yeah.
A lot of people they again would like to come because they say they want a electricity line to their place, they want a water connectivity, etc., etc., and therefore forests will be continued to be destroyed. Right. So if that is the approach, if we do not come, we have to decide. We have lot of sympathy for people living inside. Correct. Lot of sympathy. But then they can be brought outside, they can be relocated outside, and all those who have been relocated once, they should not be encouraged to go back.
Right.
So that is the thing I would like to
Right. Pranav, how do you reflect on the challenges ahead for tiger conservation?
So I'm going to respond to a few points that Sir's made, and also articulate some of my thoughts. I think number one, if there's never been a point in the Earth's history where there's been a space that's as crowded as India is today. So the pressure on land, resources, forests, it's unprecedented. So if there's one challenge that we singularly need to address as a country for our wildlife, it is the problem of land use and land use planning. Planning land use that allows for the development aspirations of our nation, but also land use planning that allows for the ecological security of this nation. And that comes by maintaining the connectivity of our terrestrial and freshwater systems. Those are besieged. The rate at which roads and highways that we all travel on are expanding, urbanization, change from agriculture to other land use types, it's absolutely catastrophic for a lot of natural ecosystems. And I think, at a conclave like this, I think a state like Karnataka can take a lead on issues of land use, whether it's around ecosystem zonation, ESZ zonation, whether it's around corridors for wildlife, and trying to maintain the sanctity of land use, preventing even the change of agriculture to other land use types. I think all of this will really set an agenda for the future, and we have an opportunity now that we won't have in a few years. So the time to act on this issue is here now. The second is, I think there's a cloud about the issue of the place of people in forests and the place of tigers. I would say tigers belong as much in farmlands and agro-ecosystems in multi-use forests as they do in tiger reserves, because that is the nature of our landscapes. They're fragmented, these animals move through corridors, they use edge habitats extensively, and contrary to what Sir said, the research we've been doing for years, it indicates that tigers can thrive, absolutely thrive in areas that are packed with people and livestock. Not everywhere. There are places where populations will collapse, there are places where populations will do perfectly well. And there's growing understanding of where we succeed and where we fail when tigers and people share space. So I think, because the Forest Rights Act has been touched upon, I think the onus is on us to have a few, to demonstrate that it is possible in the true spirit of the Act to implement it in a means that people are vested with greater autonomy in the governance of forests that they have rights over. And also fulfilling responsibilities for managing these forests sustainably, and so on. And I think there are some good examples coming out. I think states like Karnataka should pave the way and have some exemplars to show that this can also be done. I think there's a lot of possibilities. We know there are challenges around the Act, but we need to work with the opportunities there. And then I have just one final point to make, which is around, if we expect tigers and people to sort of share landscapes as they must in a place like India, the understanding that I've arrived at is that ultimately there'll only be as many tigers in any given place as are socially supported. And so for tigers to be socially supported, a lot of other things need to work. We need to have very effective systems of governance that are managing forests well, that are protecting the tiger. We need to have excellent systems of human-wildlife conflict management. So there are multiple safety nets, both for people and for wildlife. And then there has to be prescient landscape planning so that animals can move around and disperse and fulfill their natural needs. Thanks.
Yeah. Joseph sir, how do you reflect? What are your key concerns about future of tiger in India?
Yeah, I'm very hopeful about future of tigers in India. I think you mentioned in the beginning that we have 75% of the world's tigers. We are the most populous country in the world. We have some of the densest human populations living adjoining, these high-density tiger populations.
Yes.
How exactly did we get here? I don't think anyone really knows.
Yeah.
There is certain science that has gone in, there is conservation that has gone in, but I think we have underestimated the people that have been involved in this in the ground, other than the conservation leadership and other than the leadership at the top of the country heads. The political will and everything coming together. It is the people who are bearing the brunt of conservation. Okay. So how are these people tolerating the 75% of the world's tigers in India? Forget India. If you take Karnataka, the landscape, the Nilgiri part of the landscape, which has Nagarhole, Bandipur and others, it has a contiguous tiger population of 700 individuals, which is more than any other country in the world. So how did we get here? This is not that this is a, less densely populated area, the area around these tiger reserves.
Yes.
So clearly there are challenges, but there is also a lot of scope. You mentioned about 60 million people living in 45% habitat.
Right.
This can be seen as an opportunity because if you break down the science again, these are economically better off people who have benefited from tiger conservation, not just from the tourism revenues and stuff. There is an opportunity here for these people. If they allow tigers in their lands,
right,
in a coordinated manner, whether it be village panchayats or whatever deciding, there can be a sufficient amount of revenue that goes to these people, and also sufficient compensation schemes if they are put in place. So I see a future that is very hopeful for tigers, where if the predator is allowed to flourish, both people, planet, biosphere, and biodiversity can benefit.
Is there scope, Joseph, we'll stay with you, is there scope for an African model where, locals are incentivized and there are game reserves where, this is setting the pigeon among the cat? Is there scope for something like that in India with the kind of wildlife that we are seeing and living with people? How do you, incentivizing local communities?
Well, I think apart from the incentives that the government has given, in terms of a certain amount when they voluntarily relocate and stuff, I think we need to move beyond that. We need to give a sense of ownership to people's land outside the government control. Yes. When you have a tiger in your backyard, there is a great opportunity for ecotourism, not just individual ecotourism, but village-based ecotourism.
But right now there is no legalization.
There is no legalization, so there needs to be the appropriate policy changes. People need to have, a sense of ownership. Not that, the government, the moment the tiger comes into their land, it is seen as a problem today. But actually it is a big opportunity. I mean, we know with lions, most of the lions are outside in the protected area, and Gujarat is handling that quite well. So why can't we do that with tigers? If you're talking about 10,000 tigers, the only way forward is involving people.
Yes. Singh sir, with your experience, how do you reflect on that? Is there a scope for further incentivizing local communities in tiger conservation and engaging them? Yes. Yes.
We are not like Africa. Africa is a different...
No, I meant as a game reserve. Like, incentivizing for them to sort of come together as a collective and perhaps take care of the tigers, not in a sense, but I mean, this is a complicated process which you can explain better actually.
It's very difficult. I entirely disagree. What really happens is, I live in a colony in Bengaluru, BTM, where IAS, IPS and retired IFS officers stay. And whenever there are trees being planted and grown, if it is in a vacant area, if it is far from somebody's house, somebody's boundary, then he's very happy. Yes, the tree should not be cut, branches should not be chopped off. But then when it comes about the tree close to his gate, close to his boundary, close to his compound wall, he will say, idu namdu cut madbidbeku, idu nadiyalla, idu namge ele bidatte, nam wife namge baitare. And this tree is a disturbance to me. It does not let lot of resources to be spent to clean it, keep the house clean, etc. So therefore, it is very difficult to say that. And what has been researched and amended in Wildlife Protection Act, that tiger and human being in a reserve cannot live together. Tiger reserves should be inviolate. It should be free from human. And that is how the relocations are taking place and have taken place. And I tell you, all the important tiger reserves of this country are free from communities, are free. They are all relocated outside so that they are not dependent, so that every day there is no interaction. Human and tigers, human and cattle and livestock, etc., and tigers cannot stay together.
Okay. Pranav.
I'll respond to that very quickly. So, much of my research has been in North India and the Terai. It's the most populous place on the planet today, barring perhaps the eastern seaboard of China. It also sustains the highest known tiger densities today, among very high human population densities. Here's what we're seeing. If there are more tigers in the Terai today, it's also because there are more feral cattle. Tiger populations are booming because they're feeding on cattle, among other species. So these relationships are complex. Here's another example. Pilibhit Tiger Reserve today supports 70-odd tigers. When I was doing my research there a decade or so ago, it supported 25 or 30 individuals. Back then, it was a reserve forest with a 150-year history. That's 150-year history of forestry, the most productive sal timber extraction area in all of North India. Next door was Dudhwa Tiger Reserve. It supported back then a third of the tiger densities and a fourth of the wild herbivore densities, despite 50 years of protection. So a non-protected area outperformed a PA many-fold. And we recognize that there are diverse reasons for this that we're still trying to understand. But one mechanism that we've learned is that as long as there are refuges that allow that tigers can exploit in the day in areas that are sort of used extensively by humans, that are relatively undisturbed, they don't have to be huge core zones. They can be patches of grassland, they can be areas of sugarcane and lantana and so on in some contexts. And as long as there's herbivores and adequate numbers of wild prey, the species will persist. Tigers may not always achieve the densities they achieve in Corbett and Kaziranga, but we have to make our peace with the fact that there will be high-performing PAs, and there will be large parts of the landscape that are shared by tigers and people, and there are many mechanisms to enable this. And I think we have to devote much more of our time and energy to figure out the range of sort of conditions that support tiger population recovery, persistence, coexistence, across multiple use areas. beyond PA boundaries, even as PAs remain the cornerstone of tiger conservation in India.
Pranav, staying. Yes.
A minute only,
Yes,
not
sir.
more than a minute. What Dr. Pranav has been talking about, his research is all in North India, all in Tarai Belt, all in Pilibhit and Dudhwa Tiger Reserve, where the conflict is maximum. In Maharashtra and North India, Tarai Belt, tiger-human conflict is maximum. Karnataka is nowhere near there. And it is so much high that I had an occasion to two territorial divisions of Maharashtra near Chandrapur, Central Chanda and Brahmpuri division. The Central Chanda and Brahmpuri division, human tiger are like Pilibhit. And there the conflict is maximum. Therefore all the problems, people are poisoning tigers. People are poisoning the carcass it leaves. And tiger depending on feral cattle is a sad story. It should not be encouraged. Yeah. It should be compartmentalized. Thank you.
Yeah. Joseph, would you think of a policy change that you would like to see for tiger conservation?
Yeah, I think today we have the kind of 50 tiger reserves in India. We have core areas, we have buffer zones because of these policy changes that we made, way back. How about having a national policy for the corridors that connect them? Although conservationists talk about the corridors, it's not there in the highest levels of governance. And once we have that, we can get all the players together, all the public sector units that try to compete for different interests in these corridors, working together for tiger conservation. That's one thing that I would like to see. Second is, like we talked about, the people outside tiger reserves, can they play a bigger role in tiger conservation? Can we make the policy changes for that? To enable them to be a partner and not excluded.
Correct.
How about looking at inclusive conservation, involving the people? Today we talk about not just land sparing as we've done in the tiger reserves core areas, but also land sparing as the paper mentions.
Yes.
So, land sharing and not just land sparing. So land sharing will need to bring in its own set of policies. So I hope those also can be looked at in the future. I know we have the Forest Rights Act and etc., but we need to do more.
Yes. I think on that note, we will have to end this conversation. Land sharing, that is the biggest takeaway, that this is the future that we are looking at, and we would need to look at revisit policies in that direction. Thank you very much, panelists, for your time and giving us your insights.